Having a skill or a talent is a wonderful thing. And there are many different talents in the world. People who are gifted at art, at drama, at poetry, at bakery, at brewing, at macrame. And to have these skills is a blessing, but also a duty. A duty to share them with the world. And Heinz was gifted with the skill of music. Now, Heinz's gift specifically was with the fiddle. He was a great fiddle player. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. He was a modest fiddle player who dreamed of being a great fiddle player and dreamed of sharing that gift with the world, so much so that a mere month before this story starts, he had acquired for himself in a tale that is for the telling on another occasion, a fiddle from the fairy folk, from the little people of the Black Forest of Germany, which if it's big now was even bigger back then. And this fiddle was enchanted, was filled with the magical power of the little people, such that whosoever played it, whether they were an absolute musical dolt like I am, or whether they were an average musician like Heinz, they would be able to play like a virtuoso, like Yehudi Menuhin. The music that emerged from that fiddle was beautiful, and as soon as Heinz had clapped eyes upon it and realised its potential and its gifts, he thought not, sadly, of the beautiful, amazing music he could play, not of the joy he could bring to hard-working, downtrodden people, but of the money he could make, playing in the courts of aristocracy and royalty. He thought of the gold, of the silver, of the jewels, of the gifts that would be showered upon him. He thought of the groupies that would flock round him. And whilst there is nothing wrong in making a living, even a good living, for all of those involved in the creative arts, there comes a crossroads, a point of choice between enjoying the art for the sake of the art, for the joy of creating something wonderful, and the choice of pursuing money and popularity. Sadly, the two often part ways rather than remain in harmony as one. And as soon as he had realised the tunes he could produce from the fiddle, or possibly which the fiddle could produce from itself, Heinz had thought of little other than money and groupies. Creativity had frittered itself away. And he had been walking through the Black Forest of Germany ever since he had acquired this fiddle. He had bumped into the occasional peasant. He had played his fiddle, and those peasants had parted with the few meagre coins in their pockets, with a little food, a little beer, what very little they had. And whilst it was a great deal to them, Heinz knew it was as nothing compared to what he could gain when he came to maybe one of the market towns nestled within the Black Forest, where rich merchants had deep pockets, let alone one of the great cities where the rich and the famous flocked. He could have dukes and earls and princes and countesses and bishops and archbishops dancing attendance upon him, eager to have him come and entertain their palaces and their courts with his fabulous, wonderful, enchanting music. And it was as he was trudging through the forest, thinking of all that he could have and how little he did have, that his spirit sank low, and to cheer himself up he took out his fiddle, and as he walked he began to play, and he lost himself in the music. So much so that he didn't hear the rustle of movement in the bushes. He didn't hear the snap of twigs under feet. Or maybe I should say paws. The first he knew of the wolf was when the great grey yellow-eyed beast emerged from between two ancient gnarled yew trees and stood there looking at him. And his heart raced. He stopped playing the fiddle, and the wolf looked at him the more, its tongue lolling, its tail wagging. And Heinz thought that death had come upon him. But the wolf, and maybe it was the magic of the fiddle, maybe he was just a very erudite wolf, said to him, "Master, play on. Your music is wonderful. I have heard so many musicians travelling through this forest, and the sounds produced by your fiddle are second to none. They are beyond beautiful. Will you not continue to play?" And fearful of ending up in the wolf's stomach, Heinz continued to play song after song after song, tune after tune after tune, until at length the wolf said, "Master, will you not take me as a pupil? Will you not teach me how to play the fiddle, that I might bring the packs of the forest, the wolves from far and around, to come and listen to me play the way you play? If I was even a quarter as good as you are, I would be the belle of the wolf's ball." And at first the idea appealed to Heinz, especially when the wolf said to him, "Master, I have no money, I'm a wolf, but I can pay you in food. I can bring you venison, I can bring you boar, I can bring you succulent meats from all over the forest. Will you not let me be your pupil, and in exchange I will fill your belly as you fill my mind with the knowledge of music?" And of course Heinz's belly was empty, and this was a very tempting prospect. At least it was for about half an hour. For as they walked together and Heinz rattled off what he knew of the fiddle and the techniques and the finger movements and so forth, and the wolf nodded along and asked questions and absorbed all that was told to him, an image came to Heinz's mind of himself stood before some great grand court full of rich ladies and gentlemen, playing away on a rapturous applause, and there at his heels a wolf. Now, who would give serious credence to a musician with a wolf in tow? He thought to himself, nobody would. And so he decided the wolf had to go. And just as he was thinking this, they rounded a corner, and there was an ancient oak tree, which had some years ago been blasted by lightning, and so the outside shell of the oak tree still stood, but inside everything had been reduced to charcoal. And an idea came to Heinz. He said to the wolf, "There is a technique which we musicians use to help people with stubby fingers stretch their fingers so that they might better play upon their instruments. And your paws, no offence, are a little bit, well, your toes are a little bit short. They could do with lengthening so that you might better fiddle. What you need to do, pupil, is place your paws inside the blasted oak, right at the base there, where the wood comes down to a V shape. Place your paws inside in the burnt bit of the oak." And this the wolf did, quite happily. And he said, "Now close your eyes and I will adjust the tree such that your paws will become longer and your toes will become more agile." And as the wolf closed his eyes, Heinz went and prized up a huge great boulder that was sat not far from the blasted oak, and carried it along, huge and heavy that it was, and dumped it like a cork in the mouth of a wine bottle inside the hollow oak, and it fell down and pinioned the wolf's paws at the base. The old wolf threw back his head and howled and said, "Master, master, my paws are being squashed. Please lift up the boulder. There must be some other way to make my toes longer." But Heinz did not lift up the boulder. Instead, he did what only truly wicked teachers can do. He threw back his head and laughed, "Wah!" and ran off into the forest, leaving the poor wolf trapped. And he had not gone 200 yards when he whipped out his fiddle and began to play again, celebrating his success in ditching the dread wolf. And so carried away was he by his own music that again he did not hear the rustle in the leaves, the snap of twigs under paws, did not know there was a fox until the fox emerged from between two hawthorn trees and sat there. And when Heinz saw the fox, he stopped playing, and the fox said to him, "Master, please will you play some more, for I have heard many a musician playing their instruments in this forest, but you are undoubtedly the best. Will you continue to play?" And a little unnerved by a talking fox, Heinz continued to play. And at length the fox said, "Please, master, will you not take me on board as your pupil? I could bring all of the foxes of the forest together, my vixen, my cubs, all the other foxes. I could play music, we could sing, we could dance. I would be the most popular fox in the forest. I have no money, I'm a fox, but I can bring you ducks, I can bring you geese, I can bring you chickens, I can fill your belly as you fill my head." And at first, Heinz thought this was a good deal. And certainly a fox is more manageable than a wolf, and less likely to try and bite lumps out of you. But this positive view lasted 20 minutes as they walked and they talked, and Heinz spoke about the techniques, same as he had with the wolf, and again the vision came to him of himself in the great court of the rich and the famous, playing away, and there a fox at his heels. And whilst it wouldn't look quite as bad as a wolf at his heels, a fox is still a fox. And who really gives credence to musicians with foxes at their heels? He thought to himself, nobody. The fox had to go. And just as he had this idea, they rounded a great elm tree, and there, on the other side, was a hazel bush that had some time ago been coppiced by the woodsman, and so was sending up lots of whippy young shoots. And Heinz said to the fox exactly the same as he had said to the wolf about lengthening his paws, and the wolf and the fox alike were both as trusting as each other, and so as he spoke he weaved together, without breaking them off from their stems, he weaved together a knotwork design of hazel withes, and he said to the fox, "Put your paws through these two gaps here." And the fox did as he was asked, and as his paws went through, Heinz tightened the withes and let go, and they sprung up into the air, and the poor fox was left dangling by his front paws, yipping and yelping in pain as he swung and he swung and he swung. And he said, "Master, master, please let me go. This is not stretching my paws, it's hurting me." And Heinz did what only a truly wicked teacher could do. He laughed, and off he went, leaving the fox to swing. And he had not gone 300 yards when again he began to play to celebrate his triumph in ditching the wolf and ditching the fox, and did not hear the rustling, although this rustling was a lot quieter than the previous two rustlings, until out from underneath a linden bush there emerged a hare, sleek, red-grey hair, with twitching ears, and it listened to the music. And when Heinz stopped playing, it said, "Master, master, your music is beautiful beyond compare. Will you not teach me to play? And I could summon all of the hares of the forest, and when we have our moonlit revels, I could play, and they would dance, and they would sing, and it would be a wondrous thing. And I have no money in my hair, but I have knowledge that I can share with you, magic that I can share with you. I will fill your head with my lore just as you fill my head with your musical lore. And at first, Heinz thought this was a good deal. He was still hungry, but he thought knowledge is its own reward in many respects. And that thought lasted 15 minutes, till he began to think of himself stood in that regal court, playing away with a hare at his feet. And it may be one thing for toothless old hags in villages to have hare familiars to help them in their witchcraft, but if you're a grand musician doing the royal tour of the courts and palaces, the last thing you need is any rumour or suggestion of witchcraft. And so the hare had to go. And as he had that thought, they came to an aspen bush, a poplar, shivering with its leaves in the wind, and telling the same tale he told to the fox and the wolf about stretching of fingers and digits. He reached into his pocket and brought out a ball of string, and he said to her, I will tie this round your neck, and you must race around the aspen tree 9 times, and you know that 9 is the number of the moon. It's a magical number, and the hare nodded. And you must call out, spirits of the forest, stretch my paws that I may be a violinist, a fiddler, a player of instruments. And the string was tied, and the hare raced round and round, and it didn't even get 4 times round before the string knotted itself so tightly around the tree and around the hare that it was trussed up like an oven-ready turkey, and it struggled to get free and begged with Heinz to let it go, saying how much pain it was in, but Heinz was a wicked teacher. And he just laughed, and off he went, leaving the hare trussed up. And as he wandered, he thought to himself, can I not find a human audience? Most of the time I'm glad to see the back of audiences, but I yearn for a human audience, someone who can truly appreciate what I am doing. And as he thought that, he heard, not far off ahead of him down the path, sawing and chopping and swearing and grunting. And as he came round the bend of the great oak tree there up ahead was the woodsman, or one of them at any rate, preparing great logs ready to put on the back of his cart and drive off to sell. And he was a big, brawny man, and Heinz said, Friend, take some rest from your labours. Let me play to you and soothe your soul, and in exchange, perhaps, I could have half of that loaf and a good swig from your flagon there. And the woodsman said, I don't have time for all this nonsense. Tavern music is best left for taverns. But Heinz said, nope, I will have none of this, and began to play. And of course the music was so beautiful that the woodsman put down his axe and put down the saw and listened and swayed. Great brawny lump that he was, he swayed and he swayed in tune with the music and was absolutely smitten by it. And he said, in one of the pauses between tunes, oh, you are the best player I have ever heard, the greatest fiddler in the land. When I deliver this load of logs to the palace, I shall tell the guards, I shall tell the servants, I shall tell everyone that the greatest musician in the land has arrived. And Heinz says, may I come with you and play myself when I get there? And the woodsman said, absolutely, you may come on the back of the wagon. If you play as we ride, oh, it will be bliss. And just as they were having this conversation, the wolf, the fox, the hare, completely out of Heinz's mind, but not out of their own minds, were deep in the forest. And the wolf had not been slack all the while that Heinz had been wandering through. He had been gnawing at the wood of the blasted oak until at length he could get his paws out from under the boulder. And he was filled with anger and rage at this false teacher, and he wanted to go and sink his fangs into Heinz's backside. And off he stomped, following the scent through the woods, until at length he came to that poor old fox, swinging from the hazel withies. And the fox told his story, and the wolf said, it is an outrage. And he jumped up and he bit through the hazel with his, and the fox fell to earth and shook off the other bits of hazel. And the fox said, "Brother Wolf, I thank you for freeing me. Will you let me join your quest? And as you sink your fangs into one buttock, I will sink my fangs into the other buttock and serve him damn well right." And the wolf said, "2 fangs are better than 1. Off we shall go." And they went on the way, following the centre. And of course, in time they came to that poor hare, trussed up like an oven-ready turkey, against the aspen tree. And the hare told its story, and the wolf bit through the strings that were holding it tied in place. And the hare shook the rest of the strings off and said, "Will you let me join your quest for vengeance?" And the wolf said, "Well, you have no teeth to bite him in the bum with, but I bet you could give him a good kick in the gonads. Let's go off and get our revenge on this false teacher." Off they went. And they came into the glade just as the woodsman was piling the last of his logs onto the back of the wagon, and Heinz was still fiddling away. And they howled, and they barked, and they twitched. And Heinz, startled, stopped playing, and the woodsman came out of his reverie and saw what was going on, and angry that animals were coming out of nowhere and attacking this fabulous musician that he had fallen half mad in love with. He picked up his axe and he went towards them, swinging and swaying and swinging and swaying and shouting at them to go off, go off. Perhaps they would have done in another story, but they were not to be so easily displaced. The wolf, enraged at being attacked by this upstart woodsman, barreled towards him, howling and slavering and snapping, and bit at his legs, and the woodsman staggered backwards, and his swing went wild with his axe, and it took off the left hand of Heinz, who howled and sobbed and dropped his fiddle and his bow, and the blood gouted from the stump. The woodsman recovered himself, took another grip on his axe, and swung towards the fox, who leapt up and sank his fangs in to the other thigh of the woodsman, who stumbled back, swinging and swaying with his axe, and it went off and took off the other hand of Heinz, who howled and the blood gouted. And the woodsman took one final swing towards the hare, and the hare barreled forward and kicked him in a very painful place. And the woodsman staggered back, tripped over a log, and brained himself on a rock, and lay there insensible. Heinz, screaming and howling, ran into the wood, blood gouting from his 2 stumps, never to be seen again by the beasts. And the wolf picked up the fiddle. Now, wolf paws are indeed, as Heinz in a rare moment of honesty said, quite short with their toes, but such was the magic of the fairy fiddle that, as the wolf began to play, the shortness of his toes made no difference to the beauty of the music coming out of that fiddle. And all of the wolves gathered from miles around, and they howled and they sang and they caroused for hours. And then at length the wolf passed the fiddle to the fox, and the fox began to play even with his short toes, and all the foxes of the woods came to bark and carouse and dance. And then at length the wolf passed the fiddle to the hare, and by now the moon was up, and the hare began to play, and all of the hares of the woods gathered to dance in the moonlit glade. And the beasts of the forest were happy, and what became of Heinz, who can say and who can care?